Welcome to Brightly, You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. We're just a couple curious people interested in friendship, ideas, and personal development. This is a show that strives to speak to the curious, to those who long to explore new ways of thinking, reflecting, and being. Through sharing our experiences, friendship, and interests, we hope to impact you to step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Hey, Tracy,
Hi, Amy.
can you believe this is our 8th episode?
No, I still can't believe we're in February.
I know. Are we 6 weeks in? I think we're 6 weeks in,
Wow,
right?
we must be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That,
we're recording this just part of Valentine's Day weekend. So yeah, that must be 6 weeks. And it's just crazy to think, we're 8 episodes in. Um, we've talked about ritual. I
Mhm.
talked about how to brighten up. You've talked about shadow work, affirmations. We've talked about different cycles. Last
Yeah.
week we talked about vision. Um, and as I was kind of reflecting, on, just so everybody knows, in case it's not obvious, we talk about what we're going to talk about off air. This isn't all spontaneous. It's semi pre-planned. So as I was reflecting on, where do we want this arc of conversation to go? And I was
Mhm.
what we've talked about, I noticed two things. One is we've really brought spirituality into a lot of what we talk
Yes.
about, which is
Mhm.
kind of a core brightly belief or value is just, in that connection to something bigger.
Mhm.
But the other common thread I realized and then re-listening to the episodes is that it's all around kind of needing to know what you want in life or who you are or who you want to be
Yeah.
and what do you want and what about when you don't?
Right.
What if anybody's listening, maybe has that really solid for career but not relationship, or for their life but not their professional life, or what if you just feel stagnant, or maybe you just want to plan for the future because we are kind of, a lot of us are in a holding pattern still this year. And what if you, as you're thinking of your brightest life and looking, a couple months into the future, maybe more, what do you want to
Right.
blossom and transform into? Um, so does that resonate with what you've noticed when you've kind of reflected on the past few shows? And
Absolutely. And actually, what else has resonated is the fact that am I super specific with what I want, with where I'm headed? And so, us diving into these different topics has made me look at my own life and look at where maybe I have some gaps and need to fill some holes. So I've really appreciated that
I
aspect
love
of it.
that identifying what's that missing piece that could
Mhm.
make your life feel more whole, make your life easier, direct you to brighter days and brighter paths. And
Right.
so I wanted today to talk about, different ways in which you can figure that out about yourself without just sitting by yourself and trying to come up with it spontaneously on the
Contemplating
spot.
your navel, right?
And there are many ways you can outsource that conversation,
Yeah.
that self-discovery piece. You can talk to your friends. Therapy is great for, especially when there's a problem bigger than yourself, or just like something
Mhm.
that seems bigger than yourself. Um, you could go to a tarot card reader, a fortune teller, but the good ones, the good friends, the good therapists, the good readers are helping you answer the question for yourself. They're not giving you the answer.
We
They're
want
giving
someone to give us
you
the answer.
yes.
And that would be the wrong answer then, because the answer really is in you. You just have to like dig it out,
You got to
right?
excavate that.
Yeah.
And to dig that out, I love that analogy. Like, you need a tool to be able to help
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking
Mhm.
of the different tools that I use, but also in conjunction with what we've been talking about and how it relates to spirituality. And I just realized that
Yeah.
there are divination tools for self-discovery.
Mhm.
And I teased a little bit about this in the vision episode, but there are different tools you can use to help prompt new thoughts in you to help drive a
Mhm.
reaction, to help determine what you want and don't want. And so I was just wondering, for yourself, Amy, whether you've used a tool or any of those outsourcing ways, like how do you get to know yourself, or how have you?
Well, so I'm going to talk about one way a little bit later in the show, but for right now, and not just right now, in the past, some things that I've used, I'm a huge fan of journaling. I'm a huge fan of writing things down. My one good cup of coffee in the morning and a journal. And I try to be honest with myself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've also, maybe not just to find out about myself, but to sort of like ask the universe, is this what I should be doing? Like, am I on the
Mm,
right path? So I think I shared with you about, I have a tendency to ask for signs, and I have a tendency to ask for kind of big things. Like, so I was on a walk, and I said, okay, God, universe, if this is what I should be doing, I want you to show me a fox. Show me a fox. And then I went, wait a minute, that's too big. I'm not going to see a fox. And then for sure, it means I'm not supposed to be doing this thing. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, what's a fox to God? Like
wow.
if God wants to show you a fox, if the universe wants to show you a fox, you're going to see a fox. So then I was like, okay, you're sticking with the fox.
I love it. It's not like you were, on the third floor of a building going, you know what? I need to see a fox right now. Which you could.
But
Somebody could have
you could,
one in their cubicle or something
yeah,
like that. But I love that
yeah.
you were out in nature, and even then you thought it was too big of an
It was
ask.
too big of an
Too
ask. And,
much.
but also, obviously, somewhere in me, I knew what I wanted to be doing, but I
Yes.
still wanted that answer. So I went
Well,
to the park, I crested the hill, dead stop, and there was a fox. And the fox looked at me, and I looked at the fox, and then the fox trotted, and then the fox sat down and looked back at me, and I was like, okay, then. All righty then.
I
So
could see me just camping out there until I saw a fox. Like I live in this park now.
like,
Like I
just
want
yeah. Look at that configuration of leaves. That looks like a fox to me.
God, tell me what I should do, but only if it matches what I want to do.
Exactly.
So there are two things that really come out to me in that story. One, that am I being honest with myself? Whoa. Can you
Yeah.
lie to yourself? Absolutely. Can you I
Yeah.
do it more through avoidance, anxious avoidant kind of
Like
symptoms.
what? Like, tell
Well,
me
I don't
about that.
outright lie to myself, but I'll
Mhm.
be like, just not gonna think about that. Like, oh, this question we're
Okay.
asking, or this thing we want to do better, this routine we want to pick up, the skill we want to try, this person we want to be. We're gonna ignore the bad thoughts around that, or we're gonna ignore the work that has to be done around that.
Oh, we're so good at that.
This man I want to ask me out,
Yeah. Yeah.
avoiding the red flags, signs in the other direction of what not to do, things like that. I love that idea of in getting to know yourself, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to do the work, similar to the shadow work. You have to put it all out there. And for me, I've done journaling too, but I've stopped, or I don't use it as much for two reasons. One, same thing that came up in vision board, is just what would happen if somebody saw it. And
Yeah.
just that self-censoring, and just not wanting
Mm-hmm.
to being able to be honest with myself, but maybe not on the paper. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other is, I've looked through old journals, and much like shadow work, I keep saying the same thing. I keep having the same thoughts. I keep coming up against the same wall. And
Um, just I'm going to stop you for 1 second. I think that actually just made me feel really good, because when I read my old journals, I keep saying the same things. I keep coming up against the same walls. And so I wonder if that's human nature. But then why aren't we surmounting that or getting past that one thing? Like, what is that?
I think we're biased against ourselves. It's the same reason why for these types of things, I don't think you can depend entirely on external validation from either a therapist or a friend. Everybody's
Mhm.
going to have their own judgments and biases. It's about the relationship you have with yourself or the relationship you have with others. You show up in different ways. And so maybe when you're
So,
journaling, you're not giving
oh,
yourself credit for how far you've come. Maybe you're still seeing problems in the same way. That's so interesting. I wasn't, that makes me feel better about myself, Amy, knowing that you also have that experience because I get really mad. I recently just acquired a bunch of books from the library and some stores on journals of famous people. So like Sylvia Plath and Ernest
mhm.
Hemingway. I did Andy Warhol's, which was really disappointing. It was just about like what he ate and who he talked to. It was more, it was more like looking through his past planner than like insight into his mind. He actually dictated it to somebody else who wrote it. So I don't recommend that one. But as I've started the Sylvia Plath one and kind of page through Virginia Woolf's, I'm just like, wow, I don't have that many thoughts. Which, if anybody listens to this podcast, what a lie! Like, I
You
monologue
have
so
a
much.
bajillion thoughts. You just don't write them
I'm
down.
not scribing them. And I think it's like what you
Mhm.
said, like it's those internal patterns, those walls. And so I was thinking about ways to get in touch with myself, how to get insight into my character, tap into my inner knowing. And so I still needed some sort of external prompt to get me over that hump, to get me to look at
Mhm.
something in a different way than I usually do. But I wanted it to be unbiased. And so that's how I came to start using or became aware of using divination tools. It did start, at first by going to like an expert in those tools and having them
Sure.
interpret.
Yeah.
But instead of taking what they said at face value, it became paying attention to my own reaction. And if I didn't like or agree with
Nice.
something they said, that was my sign. Talk about looking for signs. Like I now know what I
Wait,
want.
so was that your sign that it was something to look at deeper, or was it your sign that they weren't right? Or how did you look at that?
I think it was more, I went to them with the question, I wanting
Mm.
to know something, not being sure, wanting validation,
Mhm.
and sometimes really liking and agreeing with what they said and getting excited, and then other times being like, what a fraud. And those fraud moments was that extra insight into what I actually wanted or what I needed to
Oh,
do. That
sure.
by getting the cards that I did, um, I now know I got my answer. I didn't get it from them, but I now have that inner awareness. And then other times, much like therapy, getting the answer you didn't want and didn't like, but being like, oh, yeah, I guess yeah, that's what's happening. That's true.
Right.
And having to lean into that discomfort.
Honestly, I feel like it goes back to something you just said a few minutes ago. And I didn't say anything at the time, but it really struck me when you said the relationship you have with yourself. And I think we need to think more deeply about the relationship we have with ourselves, right? Like, do we have a
Yeah.
relationship with
Do
ourselves?
we? That sounds
I
like a whole
mean,
nother episode. Are you
yeah.
kind to yourself? What is your inner monologue like?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it starts for at least for what we're talking about, getting to that desired end state or figuring out an answer to a question or maybe helping you choose between two choices when it's really unclear,
Yeah.
when they could both have positive impacts. It's about having that conversation with yourself. But then also these tools, it is divination tools for self-discovery
Hmm.
that we're talking about. And so there is also that additional possible layer of a connection to something higher. So your guardian angels, spirit guides, helpers and forces of the seen and unseen realms. So whether you call it God, the universe, source, creator,
Hmm.
higher power, you could use these tools. Many of these tools started as, ways to connect with the divine. When I'm not feeling that connection, when I'm already feeling super disconnected, I use it as just a connection to myself.
Oh, I love that, Tracy. Okay, I had never thought of it that way because I feel, especially right now, it's so easy to feel disconnected. not only from other people and the world and things that are going on, but obviously, I think that the more disconnected you feel from other people, the more disconnected you feel from yourself. So I really love that as just kind of a way to like pull you back, get you back connected to yourself. So how do
Yeah.
you like, okay, yeah, I'll let you go on. Sorry.
So, yeah, so I these tools, I use them to get out of my own head and to try not to force the conversation.
Mhm.
Um, and instead of trying to create, so especially if I'm like, what is my mission for life? What are my values? If that's unclear, just sitting there with a blank page is really intimidating, having to create something from seemingly
Mhm.
nothing, or having
Yeah.
to, pull from all these different facets that maybe you don't quite have that skill set. There are people who are skilled in developing it for, corporations and things like that. It all depends on how much time you have, but using a tool, I'm able to react instead of creating from nothing.
I feel too that it probably helps. I think it was Nora Roberts who said, I can I how did she put it? I can edit anything except a blank page. So in a
Yes.
way, having that tool gives you that thing to react to rather than this blank page that you have to suck something out of yourself and put on that page. Um
Yeah,
I
so whether I'm
yeah.
using one of those outsourcing options I talked about, or, using one of the tools we're gonna cover in a minute, it's like a prompt to get to a new way of
Mhm.
thinking. Do I agree with it? Am I disappointed by it? What is my emotional reaction? Do I have a
Mhm.
physical reaction? Is there a spiritual reaction to it? And just paying attention to that, and then starting that conversation with myself from there. So sometimes for me, I'll free write. Sometimes I'll meditate, and sometimes I'll
Yeah.
just sit there on my living room floor like a crazy person in the moonlight talking to my tarot cards.
Honest. Woo! Yes, I'm right there. But I also just want to hone in on something else, conversation with yourself. And I would ask the listener, do you have a conversation with yourself? Are you ever having a conversation with yourself? And not just, did I get milk from the store yesterday? Not that,
Yeah, it's
but
having a focused conversation with
focus,
yourself.
right, a focused conversation. Yes,
It's
exactly.
one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a quote, but just kind of something to ponder is when you say, "I told myself," who's talking to who? And
What?
and so
Oh my
right?
goodness.
Like, how many different ways do we talk about, like, oh, I set that alarm. I wanted to get up at 6, but I didn't. Like, who made what decision where? And like, oh, I told myself XYZ and I didn't listen. Like, who didn't listen to who now? And it's just kind of, whether that's like your id and your ego and your super ego,
Right.
differences between that. I'm sure psychologists have different reiterations, but
Mhm.
to me, I feel like it's the material world me and kind of the spiritual world me.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
so, trying to those moments when I'm feeling disconnected, the moments when I need to have the conversations with myself is when those two are not one. It's when you have that disconnect with yourself that we were just talking about.
Of course, and that is the disconnect. I didn't make that connection, Tracy, until you just said it now. I love that. So you see it as like your higher self and your conscious self have become disconnected from each
Yeah.
other.
Today,
Okay.
Tracy is just living life and trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And there's that
Yeah.
higher power that's, kind of like the steam in the engine that, gives,
Yes.
gets you excited about it, is your purpose, your reason for being here. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to get disconnected between the two. And sometimes the conversation with yourself is just, like I said, the today Tracy, the today you, and figuring out what you want in the immediate here and now. It doesn't have to be a big grand vision. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many different ways to use the tools we're going to talk about.
So
um
can I just tell you one quick story?
Absolutely.
Rick used to say to me, you should sit next to yourself on a bar stool because
If I
basically what
didn't
he
know how much he loved you, I'd be like, is that an insult?
because his point was like you always have such great um knowledge to share with other people and ideas for them in their life, that why don't you do that for yourself? So
Wow. Why don't
so
you do that for yourself? Oh my
right.
God. And how many ways can we say that in our lives? I'm sure everybody
Why don't you do
listening,
that
it's
for yourself?
why don't you do that
Exactly.
for yourself?
So do you know what I did, Tracy?
What did you
I
do?
took a journal and I took two different colored pens, and then I sat next to myself on a bar stool. But I did not connect it to like conscious me and higher self me. But honestly, the higher self me had really good ideas for me. So I just wanted to share that.
And what a way to, like, disconnection, helped you give your own advice or take your own advice, right? That,
Mhm.
like, it gave you the permission of being good at what you were really good at, the things you give and bring to other people, and then helping yourself with it. Like,
Right. Because
what beautiful imagery.
well, yeah, yeah. And I think that it gave me the permission. It was like I could, the other part of me, I could pretend that that was separate from me. Right.
Mhm.
And then it allowed that part of me to come through.
And I'm wondering if going through that exercise allowed you to recognize and let go of judgment. How often when we
Hmm.
are just having just the mini unintentional conversations with ourselves, is it really
Yeah.
just it's just self-criticism and guilt and shame. It's
Right.
not really for your higher self, your a
Right. Do you
better
ever say to
purpose.
yourself, well, have you thought of this?
Mhm.
Would you consider that? Tell me how
No,
that
it's
felt.
oh God,
No.
Tracy, man, was that
What?
dumb.
Oh, what an idiot.
The amount of times in my house, I'm just like, "Oh, Tracy." And then I'm just like, "What?"
I didn't do it.
What did I do now? So, I will say, with these tools, whether it's a conversation with yourself or that connection to the divine, um, it doesn't have to be about fortune telling.
Oh,
That's what
yeah.
it appears is in the media. Some of it is based in that, but honestly, I believe the best way to predict the future is to create it. Even
Amen.
right. So
Yeah.
every medium I've ever followed, they all say the same thing. Future is not set in stone. Answers can
Hmm.
change based on your decisions and your behaviors.
Hmm.
And so sometimes if you look at it as fortune telling and you don't get the answer you want, um, how does that change your actions, your behaviors, and your thoughts? And then it
Right.
becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. So it's important as you look at this, you can ask questions about the future, but it should be meant to help, that inner dialogue. What do I really want? Like I said, when my fortune teller, was telling me stuff about my career, it was like, oh no. I once had a palm reader tell me, oh yeah, I don't see a lot of travel. And I was like, I'll show you. It really showed travel is so important to me. How dare you say you don't see a lot of travel in my life? I will make some marks on my palm right now. Like,
Yeah.
and so, everything that these tools we're going to go through, it's the meaning you assign to it. It's a tool to help you. And if you're not finding it as helpful, throw it out with the trash, like everything we're talking about.
Right. And I would say too that a lot of the times you have to remember that the energies you're putting into it are today's energies, where you're coming from today. And that's what's going into this. It's not the energies of tomorrow or
Yeah,
the
you're in the
next
present
day.
moment.
And so a lot of times, like you said, this can inform you as to, okay, what do you need to change then? Or what different thing could you do in order to have the future that you want to create?
Absolutely. And also with this, it's important focus on yourself in your questions. We all have our own agency, and a lot of people turn to these tools because does he love me? Will she
Oh,
come back to me? You
I've
have
had
to avoid
so many of those.
yeah,
So
and it's
many.
I understand and I can so empathize with that wanting, and that wanting
Mhm,
to know and wanting to just find comfort and solace. But
mhm,
you have to avoid the questions about other people's feelings and intentions because they're in charge of their future state, not you.
mhm.
And for those situations, what you can learn from that is that you want to be loved or how you want to be loved. It doesn't necessarily relate to the who. So focus on what you can do in those moments. And not how can I get them to love me. That's not what I'm getting to. It's not about your phrasing here. What do I need
Right.
to do to feel comfort? What do I need to do to feel love?
Mhm.
What ways can I bring self-love into my life? Make it about yourself and
Yeah.
and what's ultimately best for you. And then also with that, I just want to say, a lot of these tools require utilizing your intuition and trust in yourself. But also just remember your intuition is not a toy. So still make decisions responsibly, have a level of discernment, but also trust your gut. I am big on
Mhm.
trusting your gut.
Mhm.
But
And I think too, with when people first start using their intuition, and everyone has intuition, everyone absolutely has intuition. Everyone's born with intuition. It's just it gets stuffed down, right? With all the noise in the world, your phone and this and that and distractions. You just need to remember to listen to yourself. And so when you are first opening yourself up to that, there is a lot of, at least for me, there's been a lot of, is that really my intuition? Am I just telling myself that? Wait, should I trust that? Wait, what's that? Wait, is it this? So it is a matter. It's going to take a while to actually open yourself up and to trust your intuition. But the more often you listen to yourself, the easier it'll get.
yeah, and those moments of self-doubt are typically my cue for, oh, that was my intuition talking. You know, as soon as I immediately start to be like, no, what do you know? I'm like, oh, I do know. I do know. What do you
Oh, I
mean? What
love
do I
that
know?
so much. What do you know? Oh, I
I
do
do know.
know.
And for some people, intuition might seem like kind of a strong word. It's just trusting your gut, to
Yeah.
put it more colloquially. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but we have so many different ways that we phrase it in our
Mhm.
culture. The hair was standing up on, the back of my arms. I got goosebumps.
Right.
Those little moments, you just feel it. You just know.
Right.
So with that, now that we've kind of talked about the why you may use self divination tools for self discovery, or just different ways to achieve self discovery, there are some tools out there. So divination, just kind of recap. I love this definition I found online: the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown by supernatural means. So to me, that's just discovering hidden knowledge. And I love that there's hidden knowledge in me, there's hidden
Mhm.
knowledge in you, and that, that excavation analogy, that digging to uncover and remove blocks. So that shadow self, your own critiques, your own judgment,
Mm.
the unknown. So just conversations with the divine, and just again tools to help you have that focused conversation with yourself. I will say it's a core Brightly belief, Amy. I'm sure you agree. We believe in the radiance of magic. That's one of
Yes,
our
we do.
beliefs.
Mhm.
So with that, I do believe I get the card that is meant for me. I do believe that when it falls out, it's meant for me. It took the same card falling out 6 times in the same session for
Was that the
me to.
7 of Cups? Was
Yes,
that
Amy.
one?
It was the 7 of Cups. And there have been a few times where I've gotten the Tower card repeatedly and chosen to ignore it. Uh, and it didn't work. It did not work. So it can be hard to hear the messages that we're getting or seeing. Like you said, it's present you, and we only have the tools we have and the knowledge we have in the present. So,
Mhm.
with that belief in the radiance of magic, and with that trying to, radiate brighter, just try and expand your mind, and try and open it and look uh, at everything through a different perspective. So, some of the tools that you could use include prayer, tarot cards, bibliomancy, audiomancy, signs, numerology, palm reading or palmistry, and even meditation.
I
Uh,
think, would you just, you and I talked a little bit about this on a different day, but would you just tell everyone exactly what bibliomancy and audiomancy
Audiomancy is.
is? Yes.
So a bibliomancy, it's been around forever, and actually, a lot of people who read the Bible have been following it. That's kind of where it started, but it's
Mhm.
kind of interpreting a randomly chosen passage or phrase or quote from a book, especially the Bible, um, to I don't know. I use it for what do I need to know today. Some people use it for what scripture should they keep in mind.
Hmm.
But I first heard about it. I have a friend who she'll every morning before her meditation, she'll kind of intuitively pick out a book, flip it to a random page, and point, and then that's the message she needs to receive. Um, I I have found in my own bookcase, I have to be a little bit more focused and direct than that. Fiction, while it gives me a laugh, it doesn't always help or apply. I found that books of poetry, spiritual books, and some nonfiction work well. So I do kind of curate a little bit. Sometimes too, your
Sure.
intuition just knows if you have a book in mind, pick that book.
Hmm.
And then it's kind of trusting. Um, Sometimes you can tell most phones these days have some sort of smart assistant on it, and you can be like, give me a number between one and then whatever the last page of the book is, and then you can have that randomly generate the page number you
Oh, I
should go
like
to.
that.
Yeah, so
Sure.
if you're not quite feeling the when to flip and when to point, you can just go to
Hmm.
that page and then kind of see what resonates from that page. So when my friend told me about bibliomancy, I was like, oh, that's cool, but it doesn't always work for me. Like I said, I was picking the wrong books. I came up with audiomancy. When I looked it up on Google, I didn't see anybody else using that term how I use it. I have phones in I have an iPhone, and so I have phones. I have music. Um
Phones.
I have phones. I have music downloaded into my iPhone. And so I can say, oh, she's probably gonna do it. Um, I can say, hey, your name of my phone assistant, play all songs on shuffle. And then I just kind of have this thought before I tell her to do that, of, like it's going to give me a message I need to hear for the day. And sometimes I skip around until I find the message I want to hear. Like, there's really no rules with this. Sometimes
Okay,
it doesn't
that's
always fit.
cheating.
Other times, as I have shown you, I screen capped it once. There's a very
Yes.
specific question I had in mind, and she gave me not one, but like 24 songs. She gave me a set list of songs that very explicitly gave me the answer of no, and here's why.
Yeah, that was
Um,
amazing.
and I mean, it was one of those having conversation with the universe about why they're wrong, but also like, how dare you, like, and then just enjoying the set list as it went along, and just like, of course. Um, and then there are other times too where you can, like, let's say your phone doesn't have that, or Spotify doesn't really have like a shuffle all songs feature. You can just like sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna turn the radio on. I'm gonna, randomize,
Yeah,
to a station, or
yeah,
I am just gonna, I mean, you can have radio stations on your Spotify or different playlists, and so you could shuffle within the playlist. It's just more
yeah.
curated. Yeah.
So I've never done that, but what I have experienced is, and actually I experienced this now, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, where I was really feeling, here she comes, mom. I was feeling mom, like just really feeling her. And this song came up, and you know the song, Panic in the
Yes,
Disco, High Hopes, right? And I always think of my mom when I hear that.
it's
But
such
it's not,
uplifting lyrics.
it
For
is so
copyright reasons, we can't
uplifting.
play it, and I'm not gonna sing
Right,
it, but please look
right.
them up. Yeah.
But it's not, it's like it was popular how many years ago, Tracy?
Oh, it had to be
So
3 or 4, yeah.
yeah, 3 or 4 years ago. I heard it Monday in the car. I heard it Tuesday in the car. I heard it Wednesday in the car. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, mom. I got it. I've got it and I'm running with
Received.
it.
Well, and I love that because it just kind of also then plays into what you've talked about quite a lot, which is signs. You shared your fox story, but it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
where you
Hmm.
ask for a sign. You
Hmm.
assign the meaning to the sign, so if you see it, you're going to get it. I will say
Yes.
with that, it's kind of like that effect where when you're like, I want to get a rust colored orange Chevy, blah, blah, blah. And that's the car I'm going to buy next. And then suddenly you start seeing them everywhere and you don't
That's
want it
all you
anymore because you
see.
think it's super popular. So sometimes when you pick these signs, you just might see it everywhere. And so again, it's that trusting your gut thing or choosing that sign. Like I said, like
Hmm.
something maybe you wouldn't ordinarily see in that place
Hmm.
or that might not be brought up.
I mean, you could even, and this is kind of diving deep, you can even do that with your other tools that you're using. You can say, okay, show me this kind of thing. If you're choosing a tarot card, like show
Right.
me something in wands or something,
Yep.
if this is supposed to be it. But and the other thing too, I think, is okay, you can ask for like whatever, a sign, or you choose a card for something and say it's like what you said, it's not the card you wanted, or it's not the sign you wanted, or whatever. You then can ask for clarification on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, for signs, it's not one I ask for. It is definitely one I have my eye open for, but one of my sisters and I, we both see each other's birth dates everywhere. So the clock, license
Ooh.
plates,
Yeah.
and we see our
Yeah.
own. So I'm 824 and she's 724. So there are similarities. And definitely because we now see it, like we screen cap it on our phones when we capture it and all that, so it is kind of I am more
Fun.
open to seeing it. Um,
Yes.
but I tell you what, Amy, how many people in my local area could possibly have 724 in their license plate? And why is it that I see a different one every time I go out, different times of day, different routes, and I see it? Like you would expect at
Because,
some point I'd
yes.
run out,
And
right?
I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because it's magic.
There we go. Exactly. So yesterday, even I texted her and I said, I had to go to an appointment I made at the last minute for early afternoon. So a time when I would usually be at work and I left work early. And so I'm on a route I don't usually take. And immediately in front of me is a 724 license plate. We're at a stoplight, 4 or 5 cars deep, 3 lanes across, or 3 lanes. So there's like a left turn lane. We're in a middle lane going straight, right lane next to us, and then 2 lanes going in the opposite direction. This man, as soon as I pulled up and stopped behind him, immediately completed an illegal U-turn and headed in the other direction. So I told her the universe so wanted me to reach out to her that it caused someone else to be lost and a little late and break the law for me to say hi. Why else? Why else was he there?
Do you ever feel like sometimes you're getting a sign and you don't know why? Like you keep getting, like continuously, I always see, 1111, right?
Yes.
Or 111, 1111, 1111. And
Which
then
is
I
a
also
very
see,
magical number in
yep.
numerology.
And then I also see 444, 444, to
Yes,
the
those
point where,
repeating numbers.
yes, but it's also like, that's great. Can someone tell me why? Like, what should
So
I do with this?
I had one of those experiences once where I just intuitively felt like I was getting too many signs, too many just
Oh,
open download.
yeah.
And every license plate was a repeating number. And there was a day where I saw them in order on the way to work,
Are
111,
you
222, 333.
kidding me?
I am not. Amy, as soon as I hit 999 while waiting to turn left into
I'm
the
gonna cry.
library, I called and was like, "Hey, does my tarot card reader have any open appointments?" And they're like, "Yeah, he actually has one left at 4:45." And I was like, "I'll take it. I will see him then." And I went in with like a fury and I was just like, "Hey, Zach, here's what's going on. What does it mean?" And he just said, it's a sign that you're up leveling. It's a sign that your intuition is open. It's a sign something may be coming. It doesn't necessarily mean a specific thing,
Oh,
but
that
just that
makes
you're
me feel
open
better.
to
Yep.
receiving. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
if
Absolutely.
you are
Cool.
in kind of more that spiritualistic community and that metaphysical thing, it's really growing on Instagram and TikTok right now. Gen Z is really, the driving force between, astrology and numerology and palmistry and tarot cards kind of having a resurgence since like the 60s and the 70s right now. There's a massive up leveling going on in our world right now, kind of
Mm-hmm.
the age of Aquarius and moving from
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn, and so it makes sense if more people are experiencing this, more people are talking about it. So like we said, you're going to be more bound to see it. But in my
Mm-hmm.
instance, for the numbers that I tend to see or I've assigned a personal meaning to, like when it comes to the clock, like some people could say, "Oh, well, you just look at the clock at the same time every day," like, and it just happens to be that time. I have been many, many, many time zones and super jet lagged apart. And still, I catch 7:24 and 8:24 a.m. and p.m. on the regular, not even
I
trying
love
to look at a
it.
clock. Somebody will ask me, "Hey, Tracy, what time it is?" And it'll be like, "Oh, it's 7:24. I should have known. I should have known. I didn't need to know the time. The universe wanted to make sure I knew that time." And so some for numerology, for those significant numbers and especially repeating numbers or even, like license plates, you might see initials or something like that. Some people call them angel numbers, and I like that. So
Yeah.
if you were to Google the number you're looking for plus angel numbers, there's so many resources out there to define what those are.
Yes.
For me personally right now, what I'm seeing, so I typically see 5:34 on the clock all the time. And I don't really know why, like you were saying, like, why am I getting this? But lately I've been seeing things essentially 3 and 4 or 4 and 3 equals 7. So like especially in my car, there'll be something mileage wise, time wise, temperature wise, there'll be something 3 and 4 and then 7. And
Mhm.
maybe it's just one of those weird patterns my brain's picking up because math, and we
Yeah.
just
Oh,
like that
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I also, 7 is a divine number. I mean, there aren't really any bad
Mhm.
numbers. Let's be honest. When you look at the sacred angel numbers, it's all good stuff. A
Mhm.
lot of it's about connection to the divine, and as you get to the higher numbers, it's about completion of something. Coming to the end of. Earlier numbers are about beginnings. It's all really beautiful, but
Kind
again,
of kind of like in the tarot as well.
exactly.
Mhm.
And so yeah, let's just jump to tarot.
Sure.
So I'm so glad you brought that up. Tarot, they say it's a powerful way of revealing the truth about your life. It's the tool I most often turn to when I have a question. Everything else we
Mhm.
talked about, I utilize as like signs or support or validation, but this is more that conversational tool.
Yeah.
It's for those not familiar, it's a deck of cards with art on them, but they also have numbers. So it's traditionally 78 cards with two groups. One is called the major arcana, and there's 22 cards associated with them, and that's where the numbers 0 through 22 will be poignant. And then the
Mhm.
minor arcana comprised of 4 different suits: cups, wands, pentacles, and swords. Um,
And it's very much like a regular card deck.
Exactly. You could
It's
even use a regular card deck. It's just a
you
little bit,
could.
it's a
Mhm.
different interpretation style. You kind of have to
Mhm.
train and study in it.
Mhm.
But the cards themselves, while there are books and definitions and meanings, and you could, go very specifically and have a glossary, to turn to and
Mhm.
use it, it's about symbolism. And that's why I love it. Because
Mhm.
while there are these definitions for the symbols, you can also attribute your own meanings to it. It's about that reaction that you're having
Mhm.
within yourself. It's about the colors that you're seeing, the iconography, the scene, the numbers, the
Mhm.
relationship between the cards if you're doing a multi-card spread.
Yeah.
Um, so I love it. I know you're starting to get more into it. I'm not, as with a lot of things we talk about on here, we're not experts, but we're
No.
starting to dive deeper.
Yeah.
Um, I I primarily use it for myself. I have done it for others, and I know you've started doing that too.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes I feel like such a strong connection and a drive to do it, and I love it. And then as mentioned previously, sometimes I just need that prompt. I like that I can ask a question, get these cards, and then start to
Mhm.
have that self-discovery conversation. Um,
And once again, I just want to hit on that again, that it's absolutely a conversation and that it's a wonderful starting point too for journaling, like what the cards mean to you, what you see in them, what you like, what you don't like, different
what's
things like that.
missing?
What's
So let's say
missing?
you ask a question
Hmm.
about your love life and you don't get any cups
Yeah.
or any of the
Oh,
major arcana that like
yep.
are about love. Whoa, like that's what isn't there is just as much an answer as what is.
Yes.
And it's all open to interpretation. So while I do start with my own interpretation first, I will then, if I haven't fully answered my own question or if it gave me more questions, I will then turn to the books and the websites. One of the
Hmm.
resources that I like is Biddy Tarot, Biddy. We'll include it in the
Hmm.
show notes. Just so much information there. But these cards give me a different way of thinking things. But what I like the
Hmm.
most is it helps me think positively about myself. It That's not my default when talking to myself, when talking about what I'm good at, what's next. I usually start with the weaknesses, and tarot, you're kind of starting with the strengths, I feel like, for a
I
lot of
love
it.
it. So it's like Gallup strengths for divination tools because you're starting with your strengths instead of the weaknesses.
Yeah, it helps me approach the question differently than I would on my own.
Nice. Okay. I love that. I think so for me, because my fallback is positivity,
Mm.
and I've come a long way with that, not being, the that it's okay not to be positive all the time. But for me, if I would get a spread and it would be, like the 5 of swords, and I don't know, not the tower, we won't go directly to the tower, but other cards where I'm like, what does this have to do with my question? And instead of just being like, this isn't a good spread, let me shuffle them again, to really look at it and dig deep. And then, like you said, what is missing? What can I work on um to make the changes that clearly this spread shows that I should make?
And it goes back to that being honest with yourself that you brought up earlier,
So dang
because
hard sometimes.
I've done a spread, disagreed with it, done it again, and gotten the same cards. And
So,
man, the emotions that come up, like beyond the like, are you kidding me? Like, as much as I believe in magic, it's like, did that just happen? What's the statistical probability? And like, I shuffle, I don't put them together in the deck. I do the 78 card pickup sometimes with how I shuffle them to
yeah,
really make
yeah,
sure that they're there. It's
yeah.
pretty amazing too. And we could do an entire episode on tarot and different questions to ask and spreads you could do, but
I think we
one of
should.
oh, absolutely. But one of the methods is when you shuffle, just letting things fall out, instead of trying to intuitively know when to stop. Some people lay out the cards and either use a pendulum or their hand to be like, oh,
Hmm.
kind of determine which one feels warm, which one feels right. Sometimes
Hmm.
I'm lacking that connection, like we were talking about. And so I like the method of just letting things fly out, and I don't intentionally shuffle sloppy because I want like what I need to get. And that kind of brings me to the tarot card that we got for
Yes, I
today.
love it.
So, if you've listened before, we try and end every show with a tarot card or an oracle card. So today, when I was shuffling the cards, I asked the question I always ask, which was, "What do I need to know for the show?" Or just for the card. And then I kind of paused while shuffling, but I paused in asking the question, was like, oh, I haven't really fleshed out the outline for the show yet. Usually I do that and then I do the card. And for some reason I was just drawn to pull the card first. So I was like, okay, I I need two answers. What do I need to know for the show? And what does the collective need to know for the show? So as I was shuffling, two cards came out together, face down, so I didn't see them. And then as I was kind of completing the action of shuffling, before putting the rest of the cards away, a third card fell on top. And I was like, I'm probably not going to do three. I'm going to pick these up and see which one fits best. Like we don't usually do more than one. I'm going to, and if this doesn't work, I'm just going to stop and redo it and pull another one. And then I turned them over and was like, oh no, the universe has told you you need three. Why did you doubt the universe, Tracy? So today's three tarot cards are brought to you by Trust Your Intuition and Inner Knowing. Lesson learned while trying to help others learn lessons. So we have three cards. The first is the King of Wands. The second is the Magician. And then the third is the High Priestess. So all three of these cards, for those of you not familiar with tarot, are exactly what this episode has been about. The High Priestess. What thoughts does that invoke in your mind? And then the Magician, magic, and then the King of Wands. That's a little less obvious, but if you know about wands, they are like the magical cards or the suit in the tarot.
Mhm.
So the King of Wands, to get specific, is about grand visions, long-term success, and leading your life with intent. It's a king sitting on a throne, looking away, but he's holding a stick. He's holding a literal wand. It's the suit of wands. It invoked in me when I was a kid. I was very self-assured that I can control the wind with my special wind stick that I hid by our front door. And I not only was disappointed and hurt when my parents disposed of said stick, but I
Oh,
also firmly felt that they didn't want me getting too strong in my power. Um,
You know it to be true, Tracy. This is fact.
had it not been for Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I would be controlling the wind right now.
You would indeed be the high priestess of
The
wind
high
control.
priestess. So let's jump over to the high priestess. So she is all about intuition, sacred knowledge, divine feminine, subconscious mind, sacred knowledge, and hidden mysteries, which
She's
is all about what
actually
we're trying to find.
she's been my jam.
Really?
Oh, I have gotten her so many times
That does not
lately.
surprise me. And
So
you're connected.
I finally feel like I am. So that's super cool. And then of course the magician is like, just I love the
He's a
magician
magician.
card. He's a magician.
He has the infinity symbol as like a halo.
Yep.
He's
As above,
using
so below.
exactly.
Yeah.
He's about manifestation, inspired action, vision. And then this quote comes from the Biddy Tarot definitions, but the magician brings you the tools, resources, and energy you need to make your dreams come true, which is what I hope this episode introduced you to.
Love it.
Yeah. So I know that's a lot of information to take in, both for those tarot cards and the episode overall. But we're just really hoping that we invite you to kick off your own self-discovery journey by having a conversation with yourself. And so whether you use some of these
Yeah.
tools or just a pen and paper, trying to carve out that time
And you
and
know what I
having
love?
the hard conversation.
Yes, having the conversation. What I love about this episode is our next episode is going to be on something a little bit more down to earth, goals and goal setting. But while I was actually getting the show notes and making some notes for myself on that topic, it was like, and we've said this before, if you don't know what you want, you're never going to get it. Right. So have the conversation with yourself, learn a little bit more about yourself. So then you can be at that next step to actually create goals that mean something to you and not just, like, I want $1 million, unless
Right.
that's what you want because you want to create then, a center for youth to do art, then that's different.
It's about if a financial goal is your goal, it's about committing to yourself through that hard conversation that I'm going to do the hard work needed to get there.
Right.
Or I'm going to spend a lot of money on lottery tickets. A lot of money on lottery tickets.
That's not how we set goals, just so you know.
But hopefully the conversation, if you're able to have this conversation, if you listen live within the next week, or at least before you listen to episode 9, the end result of that conversation should ultimately be that you trust yourself and that you trust yourself to know, so that it doesn't have to be a big production every time you have a question. It's about building that toolbox for yourself that you know.
I love that because I feel that through these shows, and I realize we're the ones having the conversations on these topics, but I feel as if I've gotten to know myself better and I'm more open to my intuition and I'm digging deeper on things than I have before with intention. And so I know I appreciate it. So hopefully other people do too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just leads right into this. If this episode spoke to you or your soul, please let us know. Please. We're not just screaming into the void here. But also, if you could share it with a friend, and if you have time, give us some love on whatever medium you listen on, or you could just write to us on brightlypodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram under the Brightly Podcast. We're on YouTube, all sorts of places where you can rate, review, and subscribe. And also, you can also just reach out. You don't always have to give us feedback, but if you have ideas for what you'd like to hear in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.
Thanks
Thanks,
for listening.
everyone.